The village in it with a map and a plan. No place too tiny for this determined man. Crossing the counties one by one, you'll see in every English corner a bit of history.
Welcome back to Harrogate, everybody, and we are still today in the vicinity of the village of Cattle, which we saw yesterday, of course. Now, effectively, this episode is the second part of Cattle, and the reason for that will become clear as we walk around. And I say walk around because we can't use the car in this episode. I'll show you why. It's because we're going to be walking down this lane, and this lane only, because this is the only lane that this place has. It's a private road, which means I can't use the car, but it is also a public right of way. And we can follow this down to a big house, or almost to a big house. And that will explain mostly what's going on here. It's a very strange parish, this, and we'll see exactly what it's like when we hit the end of this lane. There's not much to it. Its name is Thornville. Thornville, Colonel Thornton's village. This week in Harrogate, we're in a parish which really shouldn't exist, but it does. This is Thornville, perhaps the strangest piece of land anywhere in North Yorkshire. There's no village here, nor is there any real community of note. That's not to say its population is zero. There are a few people which live here, but they have more in common with the folk in Cattle and Whixley than they do with themselves. So that leaves one burning question: how did Thornville end up being what it is? To explain the answer, we have to first understand a bit of history. In the 12th century, Thornville was known as Thornley. There wasn't much to it, but it was at least noted as a place of strength, suggesting there was a fortification of some kind here. By the late 1800s, under the name of Thornville, it was a township in the parish of Whixley, which measured approximately 200 acres. It was mostly arable farmland, but 18 people lived within its boundaries. It was all the property of a man named Thomas Proud. It had come to him from his father, who had purchased the estate from one Colonel Thornton, somewhat of a sporting celebrity. At the centre of it all was a mansion called Old Thornville, a handsome brick structure which later became known as Cattle Hall. Old Thornville still exists today and remains the principal residence in a parish which has barely altered since the 19th century. We can't drive to it as the road is private, but we can instead walk. Let's do that, shall we? So here we go then, along the one and only road Thornville Parish has, although it's more of a track really. You can't drive on this road because it's private, but luckily for us it's also a public right of way if you're on foot. Take note though, if you follow this right of way, it won't take you directly into the main cluster of properties which make up Thornville. That's because just before it gets there, it veers north and skirts the northern edge of them. Mind you, we will still be close enough to see what we're after. Now, why this is a parish in its own right is a little bit of a mystery, but there are some historical clues. Thornville was originally a township in the parish of Whixley and was first mentioned in records in 1771. Before that, it was known as Thornley and was named as such in a land grant in the 11th century. Little is known about the place between the two times, except that it was a place of strength in the 12th century. This suggests there was maybe some sort of fortified manor house here, or perhaps a castle. They were not uncommon near the Nid. It's been suggested that at one time there was a village here which has long since been deserted. If so, it would have likely have been the long-lost settlement of Little Cattle, which had an entry in the Domesday Book as Parva Catale. The principal residence here is a magnificent house called Old Thornville, which dates from the mid to late 17th century and the early part of the 18th. The rest of the hamlet is a scattering of buildings and residences around the hall, some of which carry their own Grade 2 listings. Old Thornville was linked to Little Cattle thanks to its previous name, Cattle Hall. Okay, so at this point on the footpath, we're going to turn around and head back because that is as close to Thornville as you're going to get. This path basically veers around the edge of the field and then goes away from Thornville. We can't go any closer to the buildings than that because that is all private, but you're perfectly fine just here on this footpath. But that's not the end of this episode, and you didn't think it was going to be either, did you? When I did the intro to this, I mentioned a man called Thomas Proud who bought all of this from another man who we will mention in a future episode. His name is Colonel Thornton. Let's talk a bit about him. Thomas Thornton, more affectionately known as Colonel Thornton, was born in 1751. He was an English sportsman, known mainly for hunting. He was the son of William Thornton, twice the MP for York in the mid-18th century. His mother Mary was the daughter of John Mister of Epsom. Born in London, he was sent to Charterhouse School and matriculated at Glasgow University in 1766. He entered Trinity College, Cambridge in 1771. Succeeding to his father's estate, Thornton became a keen sportsman and is one of the leading names in the revival of falconry. In 1786, he undertook a sporting tour in Scotland, travelling through the northern and western highlands, dividing his time between hunting, shooting, angling and hawking. In 1789, Thornton bought Allerton Park from Frederick, the Duke of York. He renamed it Thornville Royal. In 1805, Thornton would dispose of Thornville Royal and divided his time between three other residences: Falconers Hall in Bedfordshire, Boythorpe in Yorkshire, and Sky Park in Wiltshire. During his life, he amassed quite a collection of sporting pictures and wrote several works, including a 320-page account of the 1794 events at Roborough Camp. He also amassed a large collection of hunting guns, many of which were unusual. He was a strong advocate for hunting with volley guns, firearms with multiple barrels that fired simultaneously. He owned a number of such weapons and even featured in a portrait which showed him armed with one. One volley gun, an extremely unusual 14-barrel rifle, survives and it's part of the Armories collection of Le Grand Quartier Museum in Liège, Belgium. He was twice married, firstly to Eliza Thornton, who was famous in her own right as the jockey who rode in 2 challenges. He was made notorious for his large bets on these races. The first event was in August 1804 and was associated with the York race meeting. Eliza raced her brother-in-law, Captain Flint, over 4 miles at Knavesmire, riding Thornton's horse, Vinigrillo. The following year, Eliza rode against Frank Buckle and won, but Thornton was horsewhipped by Flint after refusing to honour the bet of 1,000 guineas he'd made on the 1804 race. His second wife was Eliza Corston of Munden, Essex. You have to say, on visiting a place like this, that my theme tune is absolutely right, isn't it? No place too tiny for this determined man. Absolutely right. No place too tiny. And I'm definitely determined enough because the weather is still horrible. Hopefully, when we get to the next one, it will have stopped. And that's the story of Thornville in a nutshell. It's quite possibly one of, if not the strangest of places which should be, in all honesty, either joined to Cattle or to Whixley. Now, we've already seen one of those two. Let's go and find the other one. Join me tomorrow for more wanderings in the North Yorkshire countryside. Anyone for a bike ride? Now, just before I go, remember, this video is part of a huge project to visit every civil parish in England. That's more than 10,000. These routes are pre-planned, and due to time constraints, I can't cover every detail or walk down every street. Please don't complain if this video missed something out. I pronounce names how I choose to. I am very aware that local dialect may vary, and I don't take kindly to criticism about this. You've been warned. It's impossible to know everything too. If this video was terrible, make your own. If you're a regular watcher of The Village Idiot, you're not the only one. If you've got a small business, why not use my videos to advertise it? Leave a comment below if you're interested. And finally, thanks for watching this episode, everybody. Give us a like and a subscribe if you've enjoyed this episode, and share it with your friends and relatives. It all helps to keep this mission going. Until next time, I've been Andy, also known as the Village Idiot, and I'm out.